Hey, welcome to another video of Bowling with Coach Charlie. So, along with the previous videos, I'll also be commenting on the styles of two-handed bowlers that I can find online. It means the videos of two-handed bowlers, and preferably these two-handed bowlers are from Singapore. So this is another clip that I found from Singapore. So it's quite a bit of a dated clip from 2018 by Declan Fu, which he uploaded on his personal channel. This video is from YouTube, and it seems like he was practicing in Serangoon Gardens Country Club, both in Singapore, which is obviously in Serangoon Gardens. The location of that club is in Serangoon Gardens Circus, and it is a private club. So I don't know if their bowling center is open to the public. You might want to inquire if you like to bowl there. So it seems like they only have 10 lanes. Pretty small and comfy center here. And let's take a look at his bowling. Okay, looks pretty good. So gonna just mute the video. Very good. Very good. So looking at his back view here, I would say Declan looks like a youngster in his teenage years, probably at least about 14 to 15. So his body is a lot much better developed as compared to one of the students, one of the bowlers from my previous video, which is Jay. So at that time, in the video, Jay was probably like maybe 8 or 9. So his body is still very young. And the challenges of having a very young bowler practice two-handed is that it is difficult for the young bowler to get their hands underneath the bowling ball. And you will see that with this teenager, Declan Fu, Declan here, he has no problem getting underneath the bowling ball because his body, his arms are long enough, his hands are big enough. You can see right here in the back view here. So Declan has no problems at all having his full hand underneath the bowling ball. So this is the recorded view from his smartphone from the back view, right? So from the back view, his hands are right facing the camera. So as it swings down, so if you see, as it swings lower and lower, okay, too much, let's reverse it a bit. As the hand swings down, you can see that his hands are underneath the ball. So you can see here, his hands are now, so it's behind and under. And then if you play it a little bit more, this already released, play a little bit more, this already released. But yeah, okay. The frame rate is not enough for us to have a to capture the exact moment of its release, but you probably get my point that at the point of release, right? His right hand is underneath the bowling ball, or at least in the lower half of the bowling ball as compared to behind the ball. So he can get underneath the ball and he can lift up on the ball to create the revolutions and create the hook. So also take note of Declan's hand position here. So as I mentioned in the previous video, we like the bowler to have a turn of the hand and to get the hand in a 5 o'clock position. So you can see here that his hand is so when I talk about 5 o'clock, that means let's imagine is if this is a clock face, if you're looking at your hand if you're looking down into your right hand, right? Like if you just turn your view downwards towards your right hand now, then if your palm is facing, so your palm, if you want your palm to be facing forward, so this is your hand, right? And then if your palm is facing forward, and this is the back part of your hand, so this is the back part of the hand, right? So back. So this is the back part of your palm. So your palm is facing backward. We say this is a 6 o'clock position. Okay. So this is 6 o'clock. So this is 6 o'clock position. And basically, we would just like the bowler to turn their hand a little bit, turn into the 5 or 4 o'clock position. So the 5 o'clock position here. So if we were to redo it again, that means this is their hand initially here, right? So it's facing in the 6 o'clock. And we just like the bowler to turn their hand a little bit, turn it into the 5 o'clock position so that their palm is facing this way instead. So their palm is facing this direction. And this is the back of their palm, this is the front of their palm. So just turn their hand from 6 o'clock to the 5 o'clock position upon release, and then just lift up on the bowling ball to create the rotation and the revolutions. So 5 o'clock is enough. Like, you don't have to go really extreme or to turn it to like 3 o'clock. Because some bowlers, maybe they imagine that to turn it to like this 3 o'clock position, that their hand has to be completely at the side of the ball. So this is too extreme. Not recommended for today's bowling. So 5 o'clock position is good enough because you still want the ball to have a mostly forward roll, even though there's some side rotation. So you want the ball to rotate from this direction to this direction. Okay, so Declan here is doing what we would teach as well, turning his hand to a 5 o'clock position and then lifting up on the bowling ball. So you can see the amount of revolutions that he creates. So as he lifts up on the ball, he creates the rotations, and the ball has a lot of power as it enters the pocket. So pretty good. So so his release is pretty good. Not much problems there. So let's talk about his particular style of having a very straight arm swing. So Declan has a relatively straight arm swing. His shoulders bends a little bit during the backswing. So you can see here, his elbow. His elbow bends a little bit during his backswing. But other than that, if you look at it as a whole, his arm swing is relatively straight. So let's look at it from this part. So from the time that he sets the ball into the swing, so from here, once he sets it into his swing, his backswing is relatively straight. That means the arms in his backswing is relatively straight. So swings forward and releases the ball. So it depends on the flexibility of the particular bowler. So Declan here has arms and shoulders that are flexible enough for him to perform this straight backswing. So if you can do this straight backswing, yeah, it's fine. Having a straight backswing like this also helps the bowler to get better accuracy and get more ball speed during the swing. The reason is because the longer the distance of your swing, right? The longer the distance of your swing, the more speed you can generate on your bowling ball. Because as compared, if you have a very short swing plane, that means if you were to bend your elbows and have a very short swing for a two-handed bowler, your ball speed is definitely going to be a lot slower as compared to someone who uses a longer swing, who swings with his entire full length of his arm, as compared to someone who only swings with half the length of his arm. So that's just one of the benefits of having a fully extended arm swing, a straight arm swing. But one of the disadvantages of having a straight arm swing is that the amount of revolutions you can generate on the bowling ball generally is less as compared to someone who has a bent elbow. So the benefits having a bent elbow arm swing for a two-handed bowler is that you can generate more revolutions, but the disadvantage is that most of the time you have a slower ball speed, but your arm swing will be, the ball speed generated just based on your arm swing will be slower than a two-handed bowler who can swing with the full length of his arm. But the benefits is that you have most of the time you have a higher rev rate. So there are just some of the pros and cons of these two different styles of arm swing in two-handed bowling. So Declan has the style whereby he swings with the full length of his arm, so his ball speed is faster, easier for him to generate ball speed, but his RPM, his revolutions are not as high as some of the two-handed bowlers that we have seen, or not as high as a lot of two-handed bowlers. Probably in the 400-ish RPM range, but generally as two-handed bowler, if you are pretty proficient at your sport, you should be able to generate at least about 500 to 500 plus RPMs. Okay, so he has this straight arm swing style. His fundamentals are decent, not perfect. So during release, this leg is a little bit too high, so it will be nicer if his front knee is a little bit more bent so they can get closer to the ground. So you can see that because he gets a little bit high, that means it doesn't get as low as to the ground as possible. His ball, right, actually drops a bit. Yeah, you can see that the ball drops into the lane. Not as smooth a release as one would like. Yeah, you can see that the ball bounces a little bit on the lane. So generally you want to minimize this bounce as much as possible, because the more your ball bounces, the more your ball loses energy as it hits the lane. Then in the bowling game, most of the time you want the ball to retain energy to the front part of the lane, and you want the energy to explode on the back part. So if your ball is bouncing and losing energy on the front part, generally it makes your ball a little bit hooks a little bit early, which is a disadvantage for a two-hander. So if it hooks too early, your ball tends to overhook too much and you need to go to the left of the lane a lot. So like Declan here is already going at almost the maximum that he could go. His left feet is already sliding at the gutter. Yeah, this is already the gutter line. So this is one of the disadvantage of having a release that drops the ball. So one of the main reasons that his ball bounces here is because his sliding knee is not bent enough. It's a little bit too high away from the floor. So it's so his ball bounces a little bit as it lands on the lane. So this sliding knee should be a little bit lower if possible. But other than that, his let's look at his balance arm. Balance arm was straight during release. Release was clean. There's an acceleration during release. It's nice and quick. Trailing feet during release, the trailing feet is up, which is okay for a two-hander. So his trailing feet is above the ground. So this is fine for a two-hander because of just based on the dynamics of the body as you use both of your hands to hold the ball. And generally two-handers, our shoulders are a lot lower during the approach. So as we release the ball, because our shoulders are a lot lower, our legs tend to need to naturally kick up in order to balance the amount of forward weight that we put by having our shoulders and our upper body a lot lower. So the back kick here, it is quite natural. You don't have to force yourself to do a back kick. If you're not doing it naturally, then you don't have to force yourself to do it. But what we notice is that a lot of two-handers naturally tend to kick up their leg during release. This is because they are doing it as a natural response to how far forward their body is. Because their body is so far forward, they have to kick it up in order to balance themselves. So it is just a natural response of the body. You don't have to purposely do it. So this is why we say it is okay for two-handers to kick up their trailing leg during release. Okay, other than that, yes, his fundamentals are pretty good. So his shoulders here, his bowling shoulder is lower as compared to his non-bowling shoulder, which is good as well. It's good for both one-handed bowlers and two-handed bowlers to have your bowling shoulder lower than your non-bowling shoulder. Okay, so that's good fundamentals there. Good finishing position. So the only complaint that I have is that his sliding knee is way too high, right? So in the ideal position, his sliding knee should be lower. He should be bending a lot lower during his release, and to maintain that bent position as he sees his ball enter into the pocket. Okay, let's take a look at it a few more times. Maybe we can just loop this. Okay, maybe we can talk about his approach. Okay, something that I don't really like about Declan's approach is here, that the fact that he crosses, he has this crossover. Yeah, the crossover is really not recommended. So when we're teaching a bowler, if we see this crossover, we really want to try our best to try and correct that behavior and to eliminate that. So we can see that his left leg is here, and as he moves, so he's using the 5-step approach. Then you can see that after he moves his first step, his right step, his second step immediately crosses over, right? It crosses over once, and after that his feet goes straight. So he crosses over and then he goes straight. So we really want to try to eliminate this crossover. Why we dislike it as coaches is mainly because your alignment is pretty off when you do a crossover. So first and foremost, we talk about the alignment. That means when you're standing here, when Declan is standing here, he was looking at his target from this angle, right? But notice where he ends up after that crossover. So once he performs that crossover, once his body performs that crossover, right now, if he's looking at the same target down the lane, his angle is now here. So his angle has completely changed to where he was standing before, during where he was taking up his stance. So this change in angle is very disorienting for the body to adapt to, because you are aiming at a target previously, and then as you are aiming at it, suddenly your target has shifted. Your angle of your aim and your entire perspective of where you're looking at the target has shifted as your body is moving. So it becomes a lot more difficult to be a consistent bowler when you have this kind of crossover and this kind of drift in your approach. So certain top bowlers in the world, the most famous being Jason Belmonte, he does have a drift in his approach, but because he's been bowling for majority of his life, he's been bowling at a very high level for at least 30 to 25 years. He's been like in the Australian national team and bowling internationals when he was like 14 to 15. So he's been bowling at the highest level in professional bowling in about, well, at least good 25 to 25 years. So even though Jason Belmonte has the drift his name, it's difficult for him to correct at this stage of his career, but he has been able to adapt well to it. But if you're just a new bowler, just learning bowling for the first few years, we really recommend you try to eliminate this drift in your bowling. It's more common for two-handers, and we really recommend that you try to eliminate this drift for two-handers. So one of the possible reasons why Declan might be naturally drifting is that he is trying to make way for the ball to swing. So he's trying to, you can see here, this is where is he standing? Okay. So when Declan is standing, it seems that his right feet is behind the left, right? Which is good. So his hips are a little bit open, but you can see that his hips are mostly still quite square to the approach. And you can see that half the ball here is obstructed by his hips. So as he gets into the swing, his body is asking his hips to open up. So the body needs his hips to open up in order to get the ball to swing behind. So in order to do this, Declan has developed the habit of shifting his whole hips, the entire part of his hips, to the left. And in order to shift all the hips to the left, what he's doing is he's leaving the shoulders here, shifting all the hips to the left by walking to the left on his second step. So this is the reason that his body has created this kind of a crossover, because his body is trying to open up the hips in order for the ball to swing. Yep, so that his ball can swing behind, and because yeah. So once the swing is unobstructed, then you can swing straight and release the ball. But in order to create that unobstructed swing, his body is telling him to drift. So over time, as his continued bowling, he naturally developed this kind of crossover step. So you can see that, yeah. So his hips move to the left in order to open up space for his ball to swing. But so how do we eliminate it? So if you have developed this after like bowling for 10 years, it's pretty hard to eliminate. But if you're still in your early years of bowling, what we would recommend instead is that when you are taking up your stance, to open up the hips. That means have your right part of the hips rotate behind, and then have the left part of the hips rotate in front. So it is harder for me to illustrate from this back view, but basically you want for a right-hander, you want your right hips to be positioned a little bit further behind as compared to your left hips. Then your left hips positioned a little bit in front. So your whole body turns around and the hips faces a little bit 45 degrees to the right instead. So the center of hips is facing a little bit 45 degrees to the right instead. So that opens up. So that's what I would call opening up the hips. So you open up the hips a little bit, so that makes it easier for your body to swing. Okay, so from rewatching that part while editing, I realized that it's hard for the viewer yourself to understand what I'm trying to say from that back view of Declan. So I'm trying to insert another scene using a simple diagram to try and illustrate my point better. Okay, so imagine if this oval is our hip from the top down, right? So meaning that this is the left side of our hip, and then this is the right side of our hip, right? So our head is here, for example, and our shoulders are here. So imagine that this is from the top down, and this big oval shape is our hips. So what I was trying to say is that rather than having the hips face forward, maybe I can use okay, let's clear it. Or then I can use an arrow. So in case of, instead of having our hips just face forward as a two-handed bowler, in order to make space on the right hand side, which is this portion, so we want to make space on the right hand side of body for our ball to swing up and down, right? Because our ball will swing upwards and it will swing up and down through here. So our ball needs to swing through this portion. So in order to make space here, what I would suggest instead, rather than have the hips face squarely forward to our target, instead we rotate our hips this way. So let me rotate the picture. Okay, here. Nope. Here. Okay, let me here rotate the picture. So instead we rotate our hips this way, right? So we rotate our hips a little bit this way. That means in this case for a right-hander, right? We rotate our hips a little bit on the clockwise direction. Let's say if the ball is, so let's say if we're holding our ball on the left side of our body here. So now instead of having the hips blocking, when we swing, right? We swing our ball. Instead we'll be swinging our ball with our right hip joint slightly open. So it'll be easier for our ball to so-called clear our right hip joint. So this is what we meant by rotating the hips, or yeah, this way by rotating or opening up the hips. So it makes it easier for us to swing the ball, easier so that the ball is not as obstructed by our right hip joint for right-handers. So for left-handers, you will do the other way, right? So if you are left-handed, two-handed bowler, that means if you want to rotate your hips, you will rotate your hips to this side, right? So rotate your hips this way, and then you have your ball. You hold your ball close to your hips here, and then when you swing your ball forward and back, so when you swing your ball forward and back, it will be not it won't be as easy for the ball to hit your left hip joint. So you'll feel a little bit more natural, you have a little bit more space to swing, and your swing will be straighter. So this is done to minimize the drift, because in our video, Declan had this habit of drifting towards the left because his ball, because his hip joint obstructed the swing path of the ball. So that's why he has to move his whole hip away. So we are suggesting for this method for the bowler to tilt their hips during the stance in order for the ball to have a freer swing, and instead for the bowler to still walk straight and eliminate and reduce as much drift as possible. So a lot of the time we would still, even though a bowler might open up their hips this way, a lot of the time we might still see this crossover step, even if the bowlers are so-called doing it the way that we are teaching them to. But they won't be as extreme as this. Like what Declan's crossover step here is pretty extreme, because you can see where his right feet originally is. His right foot originally was here, and he crossed over all the way to here. So his right feet has moved all the way from here to here. So it is quite an extreme crossover step. So by opening up the right hips, normally you would have more space for your ball to swing, and that should reduce your tendency of your body to cross over this much. There might still be a little bit of crossover, but if it's reduced, then that will lead the bowler to walk a little bit straighter and to be more consistent in his approach, and hopefully to hit his target more often. Okay, so other than that, nothing much. So Declan is a relatively good two-handed bowler here. You can see that his fundamentals are pretty good. So pretty good teenage two-handed bowler here. So just some of the small things are that his crossover step, we don't really like that. So we try to discourage that crossover step. And we try to be lower. We try to bend a bit lower on our sliding knee as we're finishing. Okay, thank you very much for watching this video, and see you guys next time.